Hi, welcome to my home. How's everything? No, this is my home. Autism. For those who don't know who I am, I go by RobotRichie. I am Richie of RoboRebellion Studios. You have probably seen me on a bunch of other YouTube channels for rap battles or for Anthony Padilla. We need to make a documentary that's supposed to impact society in some way, shape, or form, social justice. And my biggest issue is autism. I'm kidding. If you ask anyone what is autism, can you get a definitive answer? Chances are you might not. To me, autism is a spectrum known as autism spectrum disorder. It's a social disability in which, for me personally, I can't focus on eye contact. I can't focus on social cues. A lot of things are a lot harder for me because I am autistic. The thing is though, not everyone works the same way as me. Some people, when it comes to autism, can talk up a storm, like me. Some people don't talk at all. A lot more people have been coming around and speaking about their own autistic experiences. One of the biggest things that have been constantly scaring me is, do people know what they're really talking about? I'm nervous that despite the fact that I am autistic, I could be having my own inherent prejudices and stereotypes in my head on what an autistic person is and who they are, what do they do. How would a neurotypical know how an autistic person acts? The media. Representation in the media is really important for a lot of different races, sexualities, genders. I wanted to look up on what autism representation is in the media. I've learned that a lot of people don't know what autistic representation is, but we've seen a lot of cases where representation on autism is classified as a specific experience. Like when you see autism and someone labeled under that, you think this is how an autistic person reacts because of this, this, and that. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to watch 4 popular mediums or shows and documentaries that showcased how an autistic person acts. So, we're gonna find out. I'm gonna watch these documentaries and shows and movies. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. And I'm gonna interview a bunch of people. You know the drill.
Oh yeah, I've done all this a million times.
Things first, thank you so much for coming on to here, Faye. What classifies as good autism representation? What's the point in having representation at all if it's not good? And that's what I want to find out, if it's even worth it.
I would say that autism is a means of explaining the way that I act to what people say or do. If it might seem off to them, it's a means of explanation. It's not an excuse, and it's not like I'm a broken person. It's so that I can provide an explanation for what I do and why I do it.
So you'd say someone to know what autism is gives them a better understanding on how you perceive the world. Is that what you're...
Yeah.
I know it's all fun and games we have here, but autism spectrum disorder is far from it. Just for my fellow people on the ASD spectrum, I will be addressing people with ASD as autistic people, per my own personal identifications. However, it's perfectly fine if you would like to be addressed as quote-unquote a person with autism. We think differently, we act differently, we behave differently. However, the common misconception that I've noticed when talking about ASD is the false pretense that the dysfunction falls under a finite umbrella. Those who have autism, especially when portrayed in the media, have a specific notion as to how an autistic person acts and behaves. This, however, is far from the case. The key word in autism spectrum disorder is the S in the middle. Spectrum. Think about the many spectrums that exist in the world, like, let's say a rainbow. Now let's make that a helix. There we go. Fun fact, did you know the helix is more of an accepted symbol to represent autism, as opposed to the puzzle piece, which represents a controversial company that believes knows how an autistic person speaks. Now let's pick out a random color out of this helix. This one. Red. What color is this? I know I just said red, but is it really red? It's actually crimson. The color of blood. Did you know that? Well, what about this one? Nah, that's not red either. That's a different shade of red. It's known as scarlet, vermilion, cherry, ruby, cerise, carmine, and wine. These are all red, but they aren't one specific shade. They strike similarities between different red shades, but they're not the same shade of red. It's a spectrum of red. Each red color has their sense of intensity. Some can be darker and some can be lighter. One can argue that pink is a shade of red, and so is purple. Now, do you see what I'm trying to get at here? All autistic people are red. Wait, no, hold on. That's not the takeaway. Give me 1 second. Okay, here we go. What I meant to say is, autistic people work on the same wavelength. Yes, we all have autism, but not everyone's autism is the same shade. Some may be darker, some may be lighter, but we are all still red. No, stop it. Stop it, Richie. I already said that's not the takeaway. I like the color red is what I'm trying to say. This is my personal take on autism, and other individuals have their own takeaways.
Because with my autism, I've noticed it helps me focus very heavily on specific projects, and I could just sink in entire days and weeks into nothing but that project until it gets done, which really helps out on the production manager side as well.
Now that you know autism isn't black and white, you can see my frustration when
I am a surgeon! I am a surgeon! Dr. Han, I am a surgeon!
it's classified as an accurate representation of autism, because it's not simple to group every single autistic person under the same umbrella, not to mention that the main actor himself is not autistic. Speaking of The Good Doctor, let's look at these 4 shows.
It's just shitty to make a dance number out of stims and flinching from like...
No, seriously. She's enjoying it. She loves this movie. The Good Doctor, Love on the Spectrum, Music, Sesame Street. All 4 of these examples here are classified as representation for autistic people. One may argue that some of these do a terrible job. See ya? Let's take all of these creators at face value. Let's forget about every single notion that you have about whether or not you think this is good autism representation. Let's just take that away. Let's take our personal pretenses and look at these individually. Each 4 individual acts completely different from each other, making them stand out amongst the crowd. They are still labeled as autistic under the autism spectrum disorder. However, they aren't all the same level of autism. They aren't the same shade.
Autism? Well, what's autism?
Well, for Julia, it means that she might not answer you right away. She may not do what you expect, like give you a high five.
She does things just a little differently, in a Julia sort of way.
Oh.
But I do like this representation, though, genuinely. It's just, I'm not used to good.
Yeah.
Yeah, her ears are really sensitive, so some sounds are just too much for her.
So looking at me like that.
Now, when I started this documentary, I went into the pretense with my own prejudices. It's unfortunate that I had these prejudices to begin with. I will give credit where it's due and I will accept defeat where it's due. This mentality that I had that, for example, Love on the Spectrum was terrible representation of autism is not something that I should have had to begin with. I should have went into this with a clear and open mind for knowledge. Autism representation in the media could potentially be one of a neurotypical's first forte into the understanding of autism, and if such representation is handled disingenuously, it can lead to further dire consequences in their personal relationships.
I think there's several different harmful portrayals, and I think it's working off of stereotype, and I think some harmful things come off of when people don't hire consultants properly, and I think there's lots of things that could help lots of the issues, and not hiring autistic actors when there are autistic actors and a variety of them when you want to. There's very few shows that have done this well, in my opinion, or pieces of media. I really, really liked the show. Everything is gonna be okay. Most of the cast is actually autistic. Not as in most of the cast, except for some people who are playing characters are not autistic, but everybody who is playing an autistic character is autistic themselves. There's other forms of disability representation as well. There's a deaf character, There's somebody there's like a wheelchair user, I believe. There's somebody with a service dog. Like there's a lot of disability representation. I think it's really funny.
The notion alone of a neurotypical showing any piece of media about a community of people in which isn't categorized puts the words into the mouths of individuals who could potentially not have the social communication skills to speak out against or for this discussion. This argument is similar to a Caucasian individual speaking on behalf of the African American community. However, autistic representation in the media paints a clear picture on how a neurotypical handles someone else's story. Fortunately, some media, such as the documentary, paints a picture of a neurotypical trying to see through an autistic perspective. An attempt was being made, which enforces that it's possible that a neurotypical could understand how it feels to be dealing with an autistic person. Unfortunately, however, trying to understand is vastly different from trying to relate. And the documentary, among with neurotypical ideation, tries to give a sense of relatability, in which undermines the clutches that autism could hold on to someone. For solely on the fact that the person is not autistic, they will never be able to relate. Which is my whole takeaway. Let me ask you this. When it comes to doing proper representation, have you ever asked your community? Let's say you wanted to make a lesbian character, but you yourself are not lesbian. Does that mean you can never make a lesbian character? Of course not. A lot of people have their own stories that really need to be said. However, if you want to make a main character a lesbian, and you yourself are straight, and you're going into the notion as if you know how a lesbian acts based on your own personal feelings and emotions, you are already on the wrong foot. You're trying to relate with a community that solely because of the fact that you aren't part of that group, you won't be able to relate with. And that's my biggest issue with the autism representation in the media. What I've also learned throughout this documentary is that a lot of people relate with characters that aren't classified as autistic. For example, a lot of autistic people do relate with a character from Rise of TMNT known as Donatello. Now, even though it's not outright stated that Donatello is autistic, the fact that a lot of autistic people can relate with Donatello speaks volumes. Which begs the question, do we have to label a character as autistic? I personally don't think so. What is my takeaway from watching these shows and watching these documentaries? 1. Don't say that a character is autistic. It's better to label a character, if you are to label someone as being on the autism spectrum. It gives the notion that this specific character has their own shade of autism, which is not exactly the same as other autistic people, but some people with autism can relate to it. Second of all, hiring more autistic people on staff gives you first-hand accountability based on their own personal experiences, so the best case scenario would just proceed on the path of caution. The third and final takeaway that I really think would be very important when it comes to tackling autism representation is to just ask. The least you can do is ask the autistic community as to how they want to portray. That's all that matters. Just ask, what is the proper representation? We're done. It's inspection spot. You're good.
Other
Move your foot. You can stop it.